umaakay sa kaganapan ng buhay. TV Maria, 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 umaakay sa kaganapan ng buhay.
Everything started with the exploration of the New World by Spain and Portugal. But the church felt the desire to come into the picture, the need to evangelize the New World.
Ito ang mga references na ginagamit namin.
The Patronato was a system of governance in which the King of Spain or the monarch of Spain were given privileges by the Holy See to see to it na ang missionary work ng church would continue, and he will be the one to sustain and even pay for the coming of missionaries in the colonies. If he will be financially responsible for the building of the church and the sending of missionaries, he asked for privileges, and those privileges were granted to the monarch by two popes. First was Pope Alexander VI, and second, that finalized everything, that gave the form what we call the royal patronage, was Pope Julius II. Na may karapatan ang hari ng Espanya. Number one, to determine the mission territories. Number two, to determine whose missionary will go to be sent, siya magbabayad, and the numbers of missionaries to be sent to the colonies. Number three, to nominate bishops. Nominate bishops. Number four, na importante, lahat ng mga communication sa Roma, dadaan muna sa hari bago padala sa colonies. At ang ikalima, to give civil functions to the missionaries. Because the missionaries are also, since they are appointees of the king, they are also civil servants of the King of Spain to assist the colonial government.
On the part of the church, sa tingin ko, practical reasons na otherwise ay walang panggastos yung church to send missionaries, halimbawa dito sa Pilipinas, napakalayo. So ang missionaries talagang makikisakay sa mga barko ng King of Spain. And then pagdating dito, yung ikabubuhay ng mga missionaries, medyo dependent sila sa allowance na binibigay ng Spain.
Bakit nang hihimastok si ganito Yan ang sistema noon. Na ang mga misyonero, even the archbishop, hindi nila kasundo ang governor general. Nagkakaroon ng conflicts because both of them were both servants of the King of Spain. They could voice out because that was the ambience at that time. Kaya do not judge the Spanish we might say governance, the union of church based on our criteria today. Iba ang criteria natin sa criteria nung panahon ng Kastila. That's why when you talk about the Patronato Real, it is a system of governance where the Governor General and the Archbishop, they have to work together, for the we might say betterment of the colonial society, because both of them were appointees of the king. Mind you, the bishop would only prepare the barrio or the biseta to become a parish, and the people would apply it to the Governor General. And the governor will forward it to the King of Spain. Kaya nga, ang the one who would approve it for the foundation of a parish and town, hindi yung obispo. Ang hari ng Espanya, through his representative, the Governor General. Kaya you have to wait the royal decree. Ang trabaho lang ng obispo is to prepare the separation. Gagawin niyang quasi-parish, pero the full-fledged parish would come from the colonial government. Even the appointment of parish priests. Hindi yan sa obispo. The obispo, kapag diocesan and the prior provincials, if it is a religious, they will give 3 names and they submit it to the Governor General, and one of the names will be appointed as the parish priest. So that was the system at that time. The Patronato Real, because the king is the patron of the church in the colonies. But may mga missions sa ibang bansa like Japan, India, na wala sa Patronato Real. ang nangangasiwa ay ang propaganda fide ng Vatican. Kaya nagkaroon sila ng mga early, ahead of the Philippines, may mga Japanese, Chinese na naging pare. No? Tayo, kailan rin nagkaroon ng pare? 1698 lang, more than 100 years after Legazpi. Why? Because we were under the Patronato Real.
This is 1900.
Philippine exploration started with Magellan as he was joined by missionaries. They landed in Samar, not as a conqueror, but an explorer and a trader. With him were missionaries who took charge of evangelization and baptism. He gave the gift of the image of the Santo Niño that would be Spain's lasting legacy to the Philippines.
Ferdinand Magellan sa Cebu ay somehow naging kaibigan niya yung hari at reyna ng Cebu, sina Haring Humabon at Reyna Juana, and nakumbinsi na magpabinyag sila Haring Humabon at Reyna Juana. Sa society at that time, kung ano yung tanggapin ng mga rulers, susunod yung mga tao. Ayan, yung mga karaniwang tao. Probably, it means na hindi pa ganun kamalalim yung kanilang pag-unawa sa pananampalatayang Kristiyano.
44 years after Ferdinand Magellan discovered the Philippines and died in the Battle of Mactan during his Spanish expedition to circumnavigate the globe, the Spaniards successfully annexed and colonized the islands during the reign of Philip II of Spain, whose name remained attached to the country.
Itong conquerors, they cannot deny that they were oppressed. Merong torture, merong tribute, merong slavery. Pag pinagsama mo yun, Christianity at saka itong mga nagko-colonize sa'yo, hindi very positive siyempre ang dating sa'yo, di ba? I am not saying that there were no genuine conversions. There were genuine conversions. Kasi naman, the power of the gospel can really convert the hearts of people. But humanly speaking, there were people who really resisted the friars. At not only that, they would, for example, out of fear, they would say yes, pero deep in their hearts, they still believe in their belief system.
May bloodshed pero minimal. In comparison to Latin America, talagang madugo ang conquest. Tsaka kung masasabihin na ang maraming namatay na mga Indios in Latin America due to wars, no. One of the reasons of high mortality rate in the colonies was that the European disease nadala dito na ang mga Indio hindi immune. Pag sinabi mong Indio, that's a term for meaning natives. Kaya hindi yan insulting word. It is not a word that is demeaning. That's a term that was used meaning natives. Pag Indio ka, you're native. No? Kung sa Bisaya, lumad. Kaya nga, wag mong sasabihin na maraming minasaker, no? It's more on disease, dictation problems, etc. These are the factors why many of our Indios, or the people at that time, our ancestors, were dying in the thousands. No? Mga peste, cholera epidemic. Yan. No? So those are the things that you have to consider. So massacre, very minimal. No? Very minimal. But most of the time, many surrendered to the Word of God. No? Due to the perseverance and witnessing of the missionaries, the friar missionaries and the Jesuits. No?
I call the introduction of Christianity in the Philippines as a cesarean birth because it came in the context of colonization. First of all, Magellan came in 1521. Kasama niya talaga ang mga sundalo at saka of course si Fray Urdaneta. Yon. So, ang nangyari talagang medyo may coercion, no? For example, nabaptize daw ng kampo ni Magellan, mga 40 na Pilipinos, no? Pero, nung pinatay siya ni Lapu-Lapu, nawala na ng faith. Kasi it is not really a personal conversion. Yung kung nag-yes ang si Humabon o kung nag-yes ang Sultan, okay, yes na rin yung mga tao niya. So you cannot really call that conversion. No? That is really coercion.
One of the debates, ano ba ang presence ng conquest, military conquest? Is it a dowry or what? So it was clarified based on the papal bulls of Alexander IV or Alexander VI, missionary, the spread of the gospel. Kaya nga ang kondisyon, no, that is in Pius Fidelio of July of 1453, you will only be able to go for if it is you have to promote the mission. It's more on mission. Christianization began in 1565, not in 1521. 1521, initial encounter lang yan eh.
So, the systematic evangelization of the Philippines would start 1565, no? But even by the 1620s, the lowlands have been basically evangelized already. Hindi pa yung mga bundok-bundok, no?
There were 4 Augustinians who were left in Cebu. Anong unang ginawa nila? They studied the language of the natives. So hindi nila inimpose ang Spanish, rather they learned Cebuano, the Visayan language. And one of these friar na Agustinian OSA was Fray Martin de Rada. He was a gifted linguist. According to the chronicles, within 5 months, he was able to master Cebuano. And he was already preaching Cebuano together with his brothers. Talagang ang pinipili sa mga Agustinians at that time, OSA, na talaga ang kanilang virtues, unquestionable, ang kanilang capacity to learn language talagang hihigit pa sa expected. Within 5 months, they could preach Cebuano. And Martin de Rada, during his stay in Cebu, he was able to compose the Cebuano grammar and a Cebuano catechism na nawala na. Pero sila nag-initiate to attract the natives. What did the missionaries do? They learned the language of the natives. They did not impose Spanish.
And then, nung bininyagan sila Haring Humabon and Reyna Juana ay naging gift ng grupo ni na Ferdinand Magellan, yung Santo Niño, it's very possible then na nakita ng mga native Filipinos yung similarity with the Anitos, native Anitos.
They believe in Anitos. Actually, it's more like a nature worship, no? And spirits like that. Pero ang ganda-ganda ng kanilang belief system eh, it is very one with nature, no? So, ngayon, actually when the Spaniards came, they were discussing, ano ba ang ating missionary method na gagawin dito? Kasi Nobili and Ricci, the ones who missionized India and China, ang kanilang missionary method ganito. Pinag-aralan muna nila kung ano ang belief system ng mga tao. Tapos ipinapakita nila that Christianity has it is not totally contradicting them. It is like a continuation or development of their own system. Pero dito sa Pilipinas, ang naging desisyon ng mga missionary, no, we have to make the people know that Christianity is the radically new and everything that came before Christianity is demonic.
Years later, in 1582, during the Synod of Manila, one of the, we might say, of the decisions that the evangelization approach and the catechetical approach, the missionaries should learn the language of the natives. Kaya before 1581, there were already pioneering efforts to prepare catechisms in the different Philippine languages. Imagine by 1575, meron ng mga language ng catechism in Ibanag, no? In Ilocano, no? Meron na. Pero ang piniling model ay ang 1581 Spanish-Tagalog Catechism composed by Father Juan Plasencia, who was a Franciscan and a missionary in Tayabas, which is now Quezon Province, no? So he was able to master the baybayin, the old Tagalog script, and compose a catechism using that script. Kaya nga, ginawang model ang kanyang catechism, no, ng Synod of Manila, which would later on be printed in an improved edition in 1593 by the Dominicans, no, the Doctrina Cristiana en Lengua Española y Tagala, printed in Manila, printed in the Philippines. And the only copy, surviving copy, is in the Library of Congress. Kaya doon nyo nakikita ang efforts to attract, they learn the languages of our ancestors.
It's first of all to reduction, to reduce, to make the natives settle. No? So from where they are, they're in their mountains or riverbanks, to let them settle into a group so that the catechesis, the follow-up, the instruction would be common, would be. Alam nga namang papunta-punta ang mga going from one. So that's the first. And then they would use, like for example, the catechism would be rote, no? They would be repeating during the Mass or in catechism classes. They would be asked by the priest. So, tuksohan is not tukso in terms of temptation, but you are pointed out. No, in Cebuano is tuksohan. You are pointed out. Tinutukso ka. You are being asked to recite. You are being asked to recite. So nagre-recite. So they also use singing. They also use the use of the children to attract their parents also. Pag nakikita ng mga parents na itong mga anak nila ay marunong na, umait, gano'n. So that's also.
Dalawa lamang ang problema na hindi masyadong nahihirapan ng mga missionaries. Yung mountainous area, what is now the Cordilleras, may resistance pa, at ang mga Muslims in Mindanao. These are the two extremes na they were resisting talaga. Yun talaga. Pero sa lowland areas, it was generally accepted.
Others who would not see would continue to resist. In fact, there were Filipinos or natives who were already gathered, and then they would go back to their mountain lairs, mountain residences, and that's what you would call the remontados. So going back to the mountains, yung bumalik sa monte, or the cimarrones, no, the wild, they have become wild. So this would be Christians who would apostatize in their faith. Of course, hindi mo naman ma-expect na those early years of evangelization hanggang ngayon nga hindi talaga natin ma-integrate ang ating paniniwala, tapos yung mga pamahiin, yung mga beliefs of hanggang ngayon sa mga Christians, you would find a lot of syncretism. So, lalong-lalo na, pagbalik nila sa mga bundok, ay they would maybe adapt or continue with one practice na Christian, pero bereft na of the meaning, the real Christian meaning, and siguro nilagyan na ng superstitious. So, there's the advent of syncretism na sa kanila.
Alam mo yung babaylan kasi, yung priestess. And by the way, nung araw, only women can be priestess, no? Kung ang mga lalaki gustong mag-ceremony, kailangan silang magbihis ng babae. O anong say mo? Ay, di ba? Opposite ngayon, na tayong mga babae, hindi tayo maging pwedeng priest. Kasi ang priestess is not only the liaison between the spirit world and the material world, she is also a healer, no? So siya yung nag-heal. So, ang nangyari nun, kung may talagang problema yung mga pamilya, kahit na Kristiyano na sila, ang tatawagan nila actually yung babaylan. No? Kaya ngayon, ang ginagawa ng mga missionaries ngayon, they started to, gagawin nila yung mga bata pa na parang sila yung spy. Tatanungin nila yung mga bata, tinatawag pa ba ng inyong pamilya yung babaylan? At pag sinabi ng bata, yes, tawagin nyo kami pag tinawag ng babaylan. And then when the babaylan is there, they would be raided Tapos, kukunin lahat yung ginamit ng babaylan sa kanyang ritual, dadalhin sila sa plaza. Di ba no? May plaza na, may church dito. Dito plaza, ilalagay nila lahat yung ginamit ng babaylan at susunugin yun. At siya mismo, papaluhurin doon at kakatin ng, they will cut off her hair. Because the hair is a kind of sign of power. So, ganun ang gagawin nila. No? So, kaya nakikita mo doon, parang hindi na-assimilate ng tao yung buong Christianity. Parang, they would maging what you call syncretic kasi pag may kalmen, gagawin nilang parang anting-anting. Kasi yun ang alam nila, anting-anting. So, kaya there are many, what do you call that, Christian symbols supposedly. But the people would use it like what they used to do.
The mission territories of the different orders, they are, limbawa, Augustinians, they are in Cebu, they are in the Visayas, those also in the north. No? The Dominicans were in the north, they were in Batanes also. No? So in terms of territory, under the Dominicans in the north, ang Laguna, Batangas, at sa Franciscan, and Cebu, Panay would be under the Augustinians. Mindanao would be divided between the Jesuits and the Recollects. And the Recollects were, when the Jesuits were expelled from the Philippines and the Spanish colonies, take over ang mga Recollects. So in terms of territory, meron po kaming mga specific territories. That was divided by the king in 1594. The purpose for that is parang so that each order would take charge of a territory, and there would be no competition, there would be no encroaching of territories.
Nung panahon ng Kastila, may ruling yan. Dapat meron ko yung budget at saka ang resources na kung gagawa kayo ng simbahan, sapat sa budget ng kakayanan ng bayan. Hindi pwedeng apurbahan niya ng gobyerno at ng obiso kapag ang budget mo ay hindi naaangkop sa kakayanan ng bayan, ng town, ng mga tao.
Yung una siguro would be, of course, the Diocese of Manila, no? So, depending on Mexico, and then 1579 and the Diocese of Manila was erected, but the Bishop Domingo de Salazar came only 2 years later. He was a Dominican, and so for the whole of the Philippines there's only one diocese. And eventually in 1595, 1596, the other three others, no? So Nueva Cáceres, Nueva Segovia, and then Cebu, no? Santissimo Nome de Cebu. No? So, Nueva, why? Because there's already a Cáceres in Spain. Segovia, why? Because there's already a Segovia. So, ginawa nitong Nueva. No? Okay, so these are the three suffragan dioceses of now the Archdiocese of Manila. No? So, for many years, up to 1865, kung saan ang Diocese of Haro was put up, it was only Manila and then the three other dioceses. No? Cebu was very extensive, hanggang Guam. Guam was under Cebu. That's why itong si Saint Diego de Vitores, he started with Cebu. And then, when they went to Guam, it was under the Diocese of Cebu.
I'm the archivist of our Recollect archives here in the Philippines, no, or the archive administrator. Nakita ko yung mga presupuesto. Anong presupuesto? Yung tinatawag nating budget. May budget yan. Bago ako magpagawa ng simbahan, may budget yan. At sino magtatrabaho? At ang mga trabahador, mayroong konting remuneration yan. At anong materialis ang gagawin? Usually, the material should be within the availability of your province. Kung malapit ka sa dagat, gusto mo solid material lang ang simbahan mo, anong gagawin? Corals. May mga simbahan na made of corals. Kung nasa Makati ka sa area, maraming adobe, gamitin mo adobe. No? Kung kahoy-kahoy lang, no? Kaya nga sila Tabike, Pampangoy, ito talagang ang maganda sa mga missionary tsaka yung mga ancestors natin, nagtutulungan sila para maitayo ang bahay ng Diyos kung saan ang kanilang mga apo, anak, mabibinyagan, no? Magsisimba. Yun ang pride ng mga parishioners noon, mga Pilipino. Yung tinatawag nating reduksyon, sila ang nag-organize ng kung saan tatayong simbahan, saan ang plaza, saan ang palengke, at ang mga bahay ng mga Indios, at kung saan sila pwede magsaka, no, in order to promote this, we might say, standard of living. Thanks to the efforts of the missionaries, the Spanish friars and the Jesuits. Kaya nga, pupunta ka sa Lukban, these are former Christian settlements na ngayon mga city na. These were actually the doctrinas or catechetical centers or settlements that was initiated by the missionaries to promote systematic and ongoing evangelization. Kaya ang blueprint ng mga old cities natin, no, dates back during the time of the missionaries. No? Kaya nga yun ang accomplishment. Kaya nga, ang mga misyonero, tapping also Filipino talents. No, mga woodcut. Look, for example, sa Laguna, bakit tawag paet? Yung mga paet, yung mga chisel na the people of Paete were the ones who built their own church and decorated their own church using their talents. Pero ito masasabi ko, na hindi lahat ng mga praile mabuti. Meron din malupit, meron din talagang napakahigpit, may nakagawa ng pagkakamali. Sino bang hindi nakakamali? Hanggat may tao, mayroong ginagawang pagkakamali ang tao dito sa mundo ito. Hindi tayo perpekto. So may mga prailing santo, may prailing di mabuti. No? Pero nandito sila para maipalaganap ang pananampalataya. But they are also imperfect.
Talagang sisipsipin ng colonizer yung mga yaman ng colony for their own benefit. No? So talagang lumaman ng Spain and Portugal from the resources ng mga colonized nations, no? Kasama na rin ng Pilipinas. Of course, not justifying abuses. I think na-avoid naman yung mga mass killings. Of course, ang siguro abuses naman na naranasan ng mga Pilipino ay more on sa economic. So, yun, yung mabigat na buwis. And then, nagkaroon ng parang encomienda system kung saan parang binigay sa mga Kastila, parang naging mga hasindero yung mga Kastila. So yung mga Pilipino naging manggagawa sa encomienda.
In other words, ang encomienda, ang punto mo, yung mga taong nasasakupan mo sa isang area. Kasi wala pang masyadong misyonero noon, hinihingi ng hari, since Katoliko ka, as encomendero, ang iyong purpose is to protect the Indios, tatay ka sa kanila, no? Promote the Catholic faith, at humingi ka ng konting buwis para ma-maintain ang parish priest o misyonero to maintain the faith among them. Pero anong nangyari? No, kaysa maging protector, naging abuser. In-enslave ang mga Indios. Kaysa i-promote ang Catholic faith, walang ginawa. In-emphasize yung number 3, ng hot-hot, ng buwes, na wala namang ginagawa. Kaya nga, the encomienda became a system of slavery which was condemned by Bishop Domingo Salazar. And it was abolished later on by the Spanish crown.
Ngayon, nung umalis sila, kanino nila ibibigay yun? So, ibibigay nila sa favorite families na umuubay sa kanila. Doon nag-umpisa ang hacienda system, no? Na large tracts of lands are owned by single families, na hindi na yon nabago. Kahit na anong gawin nating land reform program, etc., talagang it still remains in the hands of the few. And that is the main cause of insurgency, if you want. That's the main cause of poverty. Dalawa ang main cause of poverty natin. One is the unequal distribution of resources. Number two is the foreign control of the economy.
Bakit mo pinabinyag yan? Kung pinabinyag mo yan, tao yan. Bilang tao yan, anak yan ng Diyos, kapatid mo yan, bakit mo tatratuhin parang hayop? That was the debate. No? And that debate rages on since 1511, when a Dominican was preaching in Hispaniola, which is now Dominican Republic, in front of Diego Columbus, the son of Christopher Columbus, condemning the enslavement of the Indios in the Dominican Republic. Na Reverend sa Spain, si Francisco Vitoria, the father of international law and human rights, sinasabi, tao yan, merong karapatang pantao ang mga Indio. Kaya wala kayong karapatan na hamakin ang pangkarapatang pantao ng mga Indio. Kung pabibinyagin mo yan, ibig sabihin may kaluluwa yan na dapat sagipin. Bakit mo gagawin yung alipin? So these are the debates raging on. And the king took side of the church, prohibiting slavery. Even the popes, Pope Paul III, Pope Gregory XIV, issued letters. It's like, if you refuse to release your slave, you'll be excommunicated. Because that's very un-Christian. Ito pa sa napakagandang ginawa ng mga fraile, they defended the rights of the Indians. Kaya nga, may batas ang simbahan, the right of sanctuary. Pag ang isang Pinoy, ay naakusahan at alam niya ang accusation hindi he will not receive fair justice talaga, tatakbo yan ng simbahan, hahawakan ng altar, sisigaw niya sanctuaryo. The church will protect that person and will give him proper justice.
In fact, the Synod of Manila was the churchmen, pronouncing against slavery, against what they term as the illegal conquest of the Philippines, and against the Spanish encomenderos, against the alcaldes mayores. So it's good to look back at that, that history na kung saan the church was really protecting the Filipino, the native.
The Synod of Manila was initiated by the first bishop, the only bishop of the Philippines. Now, remember, the Diocese of Manila was created in 1579 as a suffragan under the Archdiocese of Mexico. And the first bishop was a Dominican, Domingo de Salazar. He was a disciple of the famous defender of the Indios, Bartolome de las Casas of Latin America. Okay. So, they were in nasa Bicol sila, tumigil ang galyon doon kasi walang hangin. They have to wait for the wind that will bring them to Manila. So, ang ginawa ni Bishop Salazar, he wanted to see first-hand condition of his vast diocese, the whole Philippines. He traveled from Bicol to Manila inland. Tandaan niyo, wala pang skyway noon. Wala pang eroplano, wala pang highway. Talagang aakit ka ng bundok, tatawid ka ng mga sapa. Talagang he wanted to experience and to know the problems of the new diocese and the new colony of Spain.
So when Bishop Domingo de Salazar arrived in 1581, kaagad-agad he got the news of abuses because the Augustinians, the Franciscans, denounced to him the abusive encomenderos.
When he arrived in Manila in 1581, he decided to call for a synod. Nagsama ng synod, pero nag-convene 1582, natapos 1586.
So the synod is a gathering of ecclesiastics. We are told that 90 churchmen attended that, plus 6 laymen, the oldest, the wisest,
So ang diniscuss unang-una, ano ba ang presence ng Spain dito? What is his presence? Military or apostolic, missionary? Dinefine nila ang So, they define Ang Pilipinas, it is not a price of war. Buti, ika nga. Dahil sa gera, wala namang gera eh. Hindi mo inagaw to sa kalaban. Nandito ka, nagplant ka ng cross, inaangkin mo Pilipinas, may gera ba? When you planted the cross, no, that's one of the conditions of acquiring a colony. But there is, we might say, one of the papal bulls, no, of Pope Alexander VI na you can only stay in that country, in that place of your conquest, if you're going to promote the Christian faith. Ika nga, missionary ang presence ng Spain sa Pilipinas. Yan. Pangalawa, the problem of slavery. Oo nga, mga Katoliko, may mga ika nga, mga dati naging kapel, they were maintaining slaves. So ito pang problema. Kaya nga gumawa sila ng pamamaraan para matigil na ang practice ng slavery sa Pilipinas. Both the Indios who became Catholic, and the lay Spaniards.
No? But they did not condemn slavery absolutely sapagkat ang slavery sa Pilipinas, it's not the same as the chattel slavery of Europe na kung saan chattel is rin. You can be sold, you can be so dito, according to one document, the natives have 20 or more manners of enslaving. Some are slave from their parents, no, tapos or gotten in a just war.
Kaya define nila yung katulong na aliping mamamahay at aliping sasagilid na slave. So ang kinamdan nila yung chattel, aliping sagigilid, no? Ang aliping mamamahay, bigyan nyo ng sweldo yan kasi taga-alaga lang yan, household help lang yan, kailangan ng sweldo yan, no? So, dinistinguish nila yon, no? Ang kanilang kode yung chattel, talagang trato mo na sa isang tao parang hayop. Hindi pwede yan. As a Christian, you don't practice that kind of slavery.
Even before the Synod of Manila, the king had prohibited slavery sa Pilipinas. The Royal Order of 1574. So they had, there was an order against enslaving. Kung na-enslave yan, i-release yan. You know.
At pangatlo, no, the collection of tribute. Yung tribute today, which we call taxes. Ano ba purpose ng taxes? Ibubulsa mo lang. Hindi pwede yan. Kaya nga, ang sabi nila, only those who were baptized can pay the taxes on a normal basis. They should see the benefits of the taxes that they are paying. No? Kaya nga, ito sa mga tatlong ito ang discussion ng Synod of Manila. In other words, they were already promoting what we call today social justice. Social justice. No? Thanks to the efforts of the Augustinians, the Franciscans, and Bishop Salazar, no? And the Jesuits.
And what is supposed to be the product of that? Manual for confessors. Kasi hindi lamang mag-denounce, kundi anong gagawin natin ngayon? Kung nagkasala ito, so yun, manual. So huwag niyong i-absolve ang mga encomenderos, ang mga Kristiyano pag ganito, ganoon. So that was supposed to be the outcome, no? But because of the opposition of the encomenderos, plus nasunog pa yung mga manuscript, this so-called manual for confessors ay only lately, very lately, na edited by Father Paul Dumol, 2014.
Merong manual na nilinis ang SID. If you refuse to release your slave, you'll be excommunicated. You cannot receive Holy Communion. And one of the guidelines na you want to be baptized, one condition, before baptism, release your slaves.
There was another attempt in the 1640s of scribes to transcribe, tapos nagdagdag sila ng mga text na hindi talaga original. Kaya itong ginawa ni Father Dumol was, as editor, ay nilinis ito, no? And he said, well, I worked on this for 12 years, pero I would not be surprised if later on, meron pang mga dagdag o meron pang mga correction. So, but in a sense, it's a very important document because it makes us look back and then say, "Oy, hindi pala the Spaniards para were not just arresting the Filipinos left and right, but they were defending the Filipinos, no? But also because there were abuses of the encomenderos." I would say that ultimately, ang conversion is a work of God. But there are factors, psychological factors, social factors, political factors. Halimbawa, we will go into yung sa survey with the Filipinos kung tatanggapin nila ang jurisdiction of the King of Spain, no? Because that was how eventually it turned out to be na because of the Synod of Manila, si Domingo Salazar was asking, ganon. So the king said, okay, so let's ask the people, no? And itong native sa Nueva Segovia was saying na we will accept the king because the Castilians, Makasila, freed us from our datu, from the tyranny of our principales, from the tyranny of datu. And then the friars freed us from the abuses of the Castilla. So tapos, in other areas, halimbawa, there would be the rivalry of the Muslims. So ang natives are, whether they like it or not, they would be under a sovereign, a king, or a leader, no? Either Muslim or their principal or the King of Spain. Our history is based on what the friars have written, and while they talk about those who resisted, they also talk a lot about those who have accepted. And they would also give evidence na ito ay tunay na conversion because siya ay nagpapatuloy ng maging tapat, or he left this kind of previous practice, no? And then there were also lay people na nababasa natin sa mga chronicles ng mga religious orders na pinipresent ng mga religious themselves as examples for their brethren. Tingnan mo itong lay person na ito, itong lay woman na yan. So they have that in their chronicles for the edification of their own religious brothers.
Yung padrino system, di ba? Napaka-ingrained sa atin yung pag may kilala ka dyan sa taas, okay ka na. Hindi ba? Pati nga kaming madre, parang they are using us kasi, for example, may super kami, no? Nahuli kami or something. Pag nakita ng pulis na may madre, o sige na, pumunta na kayo. Sabi ko sa super, huwag mo akong gagamiting excuse, papapreso kita. Yung ganun ba? Para bang yung, basta meron kang kilala sa mataas-taas ng kung anong gusto mo. Ay, dito pala sa amin, even dito sa amin, pag nag-entrance exam, may dadating na parents, may daladalang sulat ng obispo na nakalagay sa sulat na, can I accept daw the child. Alam mo, sinasabi ko doon sa parents, alam nyo po, pag nakapasa ang anak nyo, walang problema. Pag nalagpak po, kahit na letter ng Santo Papa, hindi ko po papakinggan, sabi ko. At saka, yung lusot ng lusot din. Kasi noon, di ba, ito, mga colonial masters mo to, siyempre, hindi ka makalaban ng husto. So, ang gagawin mo, lulusot ka na lang. Hindi ba? Kasi, siyempre, sige, mag-command kayo, pero kung wala na kayo dyan, I will not do it. Ganon, di ba? Anong nangyari? Kahit na wala na tayong colonial masters, lusot pa rin tayo ng lusot. Diba? Pero tingnan mo ang mga migrant workers, pag nandun sila sa abroad, they obey everything. They are the most law-abiding citizens, I tell you. Pagdating nila dito, lusot na lusot uli. Why? Because they know there, ipapairal ang batas. Dito sa atin, alam na alam nila pag meron kang padrino or meron kang bribe or meron kang ganito, pwede kang lumusot.
But eventually, there would be advantages also to that because they would introduce the arado, no? They would introduce the plants that they brought from America. They would introduce music. They would introduce in exchange for that free roaming existence. they would have also the benefit of civilization. Yun, yung agriculture, culture, religious instruction.
Hindi lang yan, they produce grammar books and dictionaries that preserve the languages of our ancestors. Kaya nga, it is unfair to say that the missionaries destroyed the languages of the native. Though that is a fallacy. They rather preserve our languages. Kaya nga sino nag-systematize, nag-compose ng grammar books? Mga misyonero. Dictionary, Spanish and Bicol Spanish Dictionary. Mga misyonero. So, and there are words, na Spanish words, which could not be translated, that has no native equivalent. It was already adopted in the language of the natives, like kutsara, tinidor, silya, diba? Diyos, God, no? So these are were adopted by the natives thanks to the efforts of the missionaries. And one thing that the natives that they were attracted to was the charity of the missionaries. If you want to save the soul, first save the body. Sino nag-establish ng mga unang hospital dito? Mga Franciscans, mga misyonero, libre, no? They even consulted yung mga herbularyo to study the different medicinal plants available in the Philippines at that time, no? And they were able to use these medicinal herbs to cure the sick. Kaya nga noon, wala pang NGO, wala pang LGU noon, wala pang Caritas Manila noong panahon ng Kastila, no? Kaya nga, no, sariling kayod sila. They have to survive on their own and they have to depend on with the help of the friars. Kapag may bagyo, no, binaha sila, hindi sila maghihintay ng tulong sa gobyerno, walang tutulong sa kanila. That's why they are using the natural resources that are available to them.
At kung titignan mo nga, in spite of all those negative things, no, talaga naman tayong mga Pilipino at talagang parang hindi natin makakalimutan o hindi natin na-doubt about God's existence, no? Kung minsan nga yung mga artista, kung magsalita sila, ay salamat sa Diyos or ang Diyos hindi mo yan maririnig sa West. Ay, may mga artista na they will say, ay salamat sa Diyos or ay, ano ko dun, ipapaubaya ko na sa God, yun yan. In other words, meron din tayong na-assimilate na belief in God's existence.
We have been doing it, no? We have been doing it in their own way abroad. Sino nagbubuhay ng mga simbahan sa Europe, sa Amerika? Mga Pilipino, sa nakikita winter, may simbang gabi. Ha? So, pag may Pilipino nahihirapan, okay, nagtutulungan sila. Same I have been in Rome for 11 years. I have seen mga na sa Centro Pilipino, ang isang kapatid natin dito hindi makauwi, nawalan ng trabaho. Pass the hat! Pass the hat. That's gifted to give. Yung mga na-bless, tutulong yan sa kapwa Pilipino. Ito sa pandemic, ang ating mga frontliners, what do you call that, mga frontliners? They're risking themselves just, no, to help us overcome this pandemic. What do you call? Gifted to give.
Nakatulong yung pagpadadala ng Christianity sa atin, no? Kasi kung hindi siguro they will not have that kind of missionary zeal to kasi yung mga indigenous people naman wala silang missionary zeal. They do not convert people. Hindi ba? Parang tribal nga eh. You were born in that religion, you were born in that belief, pero wala silang urge na ibahagi. That is siguro ang difference. Para ang Christian belief has the urge to spread it, to share it with other people.
So we are a missionary church, no? And ang pagiging missionary po natin ay hindi tulad ng pagiging missionary dati na they arrive, no? Parang magkatabi yung cross and the sword. Tayo, when we go, no, Pilipino, ang Pilipino pagdating doon wala rin dalang resources, no, pera. Talagang faith lang yung dala ng missionary. But still, I believe we are making a difference, no? Filipinos are making a difference
At saka yung resilience na lang nila pag may disaster, na hindi sila nawawala ng pag-asa, di ba? Hindi naman sila nagsusuicide, hindi ba? Hindi ba? Yung resilience nila na, isasabihin nila, oh sige, we will begin again. Now that is a Christian virtue.
The Filipino has accepted the Catholic faith calmly, serenely, and although not perfectly, they also, it comes out naturally to them. When they go to other countries, they just come out going to Mass, singing the Mass, joyful, naniniwala, it puts God in their life. Although we are not all consistent in all the practices, pero there is that basic faith, but that basic belief, that basic goodness.
No, the faith is given freely. It was implanted to us when we are baptized. Now, how do you live your faith and how the faith blesses you? That's the time you share the fruits of your faith. And the fruits of your faith is charity. Because I know that charity must be the product of that faith that we have received from the Lord. No, faith alive in charity. Charity sustained by faith.